go. I am me again.
Well, I tell you, I mean, this is going to be a great opening for the Grammys.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
The Grammys.
We'll send it to
Are you sure it's maybe not the grannies? The granny, like the 13 indigenous grandmothers, the grannies. Yes, I feel more of a relation to them than the Grammys, but So this is I'll just share this bit of this song.
Cool.
As you well know, Rumi, and my favorite quote of Rumi's is this song basically. Of course, this is the English version of it. Have beyond notions of right doing and wrongdoing. There is a field. There is a field. I'll meet you there. I'll meet you there. When the soul lies down in that grass, the world is too full to talk about. Ideas and words, even the phrase each other, do not make any sense. Out beyond notions of right doing and wrong doing. There is a field. There is a field. I'll meet you there. I'll meet you there. And that's how that goes on and on.
That is beautiful. I think any future podcast, we should open with that song. I mean, who needs to do a podcast? That says it all.
Exactly. Well, it says it all, and it also is the challenge of the moment. I was just reading a Cliff High newsletter, and I know you read Cliff as well, and he calls it the cult of the weak. Politicians want you weak in mind so they can control you, granting them power. Bankers want you weak in knowledge so they can harvest you via your ignorance about their money system. World Economic Forum wants you weak in personality so that you do suicide on their urging. He said, "Do you think this is hyperbole? Think about the injections of unknown substances. Your enemies want you weak in all ways so that they may remove you from this planet to claim it as their own." And we have obviously a lot of narratives around transhumanism and AI, and an agenda, a pre-existing and ongoing agenda. I think I had mentioned the Saratoga Ocean video. You may have seen it as well, where she's really kind of laying out that, hey, if you wanted a world run by robots, think about exactly what happened during the COVID and has been happening during the COVID restrictions. Robots don't need food. You don't need jobs. You don't need relationships. You don't have to go out. You don't need to breathe if you're a robot. So a lot of what is being done is seems to be prologue to something. And so I guess the question for us today, I think for me anyways, to throw out to you maybe to start is, that we're in the midst of the end of one system and not quite yet the beginning of another. Shunya Murti talks a lot about this. A lot of people that we listen to talk about this. And where do we come down in our awakening process for holding a higher vibration on the one hand, and on the other hand, seeing what's happening and not overreacting to it, but not also just pretending that it's not happening at the same time. There's certainly there can be a whole lot of overriding in the spiritual community like just seeing love. And I don't want to think about that because if I think about that, that's making it happen. So I'm not going to see it. And I call that the Nazi movement. Nazi, I'm not going to see it.
I like it.
If I don't see it, it's not happening. And
Uh-huh.
I mean, I appreciate really in a way that perspective. In a way, it's like people like I just want to focus on the life that I'm having. But in a way, I mean, the term that comes to mind like is Rome is burning, and it's like we're what do we do? We're not here to ignore it, but we're also not here to necessarily enter into always into the dual fray. But at the same time, there are different things that people can choose to do in terms of either fighting the system, trying to change it, or moving towards a different system using kind of the idea of Buckminster Fuller, as you probably well aware of, in his many writings. And I think that the thing I'm thinking about is his quote about don't try to change the system. You can't change the system. There's so much endemic advantage seeking in the system, and this what we could call game A, driven by, as some people talk about game A, these generator functions of the win-lose generator function that if I don't grab as much I can for me, then there won't be enough. There won't be enough for me, and everyone else is going to grab. So if I don't grab, and then that leads to this decimation of our natural environment and fear and scarcity mindset. So I know I just covered a lot there. I had a question.
That's a lot of fertile ground to dig in.
So yeah, so it's like, I guess I'll just bring it back to the main question. Where are you today in this conversation of seeing what's happening and recognizing what Cliff High is saying, that there's an agenda out there that seems to be aimed at our extinction in a way. And on the other hand, we have Dr. Zach Bush saying, hey, part of what we need to be remembering is that no one is against us. So how do we balance this out, Paul? I mean, really?
Yeah, that's such great questions and well framed. And I mean, a couple of things as you were speaking. One was, not to spend much time here, but I just saw some headline the other day that 29 Japanese engineers were killed by an AI robot that was they were deconstructing some other robots, and the one robot that was still active went up through the satellite and tried to figure out what's going on, and they don't know all the details, but ended up killing 29 of these engineers. So there is a path that many people are focused on convenience, or all the reasons why they think technology is it. And of course, this goes back to the Industrial Revolution. It's been playing out, the technocracy, all of that, which you know very well. So that's one thing. The other thing is, and I always go for, as best I can, simple answers. To me, truth often is very simple. Buckminster Fuller, that quote was very simple and very clear and very wise. The one that came as you were speaking is the one that the Native Americans have shared, of being in the world but not of the world. And for someone to wrap their head around that and say, what do you mean? What do I do? Go ayahuasca, or I have to leave? And no, it's like your breath. Okay. If you're sitting here focusing and you're learning how to meditate, I saw a wonderful video by Alan Watts the other day. He's another one of my heroes and favorite guys. But he was talking about the reason they have all these meditative practices is to get you to quiet the mind, okay? And to focus on your breath and consciously breathing in and breathing out. But the reality is, when you're out doing this podcast, or out planting your garden, or protesting or demonstrating against something, you're breathing, okay? So being in the world, but not of the world. So we are source creator beings. We are a natural breath that is connected eternally. And yet we find ourselves consciously here in this world with the seeming Armageddon. Why did we all choose to be here now? And we all of us have created this very reality that we then want to protest or demonstrate against. So this is not to say that demonstrating, if this is coming from your heart, you can't blow this, okay? You got to follow your truth. You got to follow your heart, in my simple way of thinking things. And what does that mean? Well, it means I look at the energy I'm putting out into the world, and I'm looking at what gives me joy, okay, and what is beautiful. As Zach Bush says, beauty and love. That's what he talks about. It's very simple, and yet it can be very complex because we're bombarded constantly. If you're watching the news or you're meeting people on the street, I think of it as many, many people are more in the world, okay, but they're not observing. And what I'm looking at is how can we help educate, invite people to take a pause, to go sit in nature, focus on their breath and breathing, and think about who you really are. You know, if your answer is, well, I'm the son of an alcoholic and a workaholic, and, you know, I only know how to work and that's my life. Well, that could be your reality, your belief system. But if you can start to peel away, when did this start? It goes back to you and I and some of the podcasts we talked about the birth experience. I mean, the waters have broken here, folks. Okay. And we're in this place of pain and darkness. And yet, our eternal being created that birth. It wasn't just our parents or the world. We created that experience. So here we are, having created what we are. It's time to wake up. It's time to be born. How are we going to respond to what we see going on in the world, knowing that we're here, but we're not here? We're eternal beings. And we have so many skills and abilities beyond what we've thought or been programmed to think we have. That's the AI generation. You know, that's the whole reality there. We're going to make your life easier. We're going to make it beautiful. Just get a chip put in you. You'll never be sick again. You know, you don't have to, you know, you can figure anything out. You'll be a genius. It's not you, okay? It's something else that's been created and it can be manipulated. We are so much more than that. So I'm certainly very present with what you're sharing. And I see it in family members, I see it in friends, I see it in the greater society here. There's a lot of people struggling right now. And I could get into that and get all worried about it or feel I have to fix it, or I can be who I am, be in compassion. Soon as there's judgment, we separate, and that creates the energy of separation. Fear, judgment, control, separation. So what can I do? I can be out of judgment and look at this person who's a Trumper, or this person who's progressive, a fan of Biden, he's their hero, and just be present to this is their reality, and be in my compassionate place so I can be present with them and hold a frequency that has the greatest opportunity. If I'm holding love and compassion, that frequency is a higher frequency, and that can impact that person, whether they might change or in 10 years remembered the conversation. Wow, that guy didn't get into battling with me or whatever. That's my feeling in the moment, is we are powerful. And if I reside in that powerful eternal place within my heart, that has the best chance. Plus it keeps me at peace and keeps me out of the world, but I'm still present. I'm not separating from the reality that's going on around me. I don't know, is that maybe jump in there?
I think that certainly, I mean, it reminds me that, you know, whatever we're generating is where we're going. I mean, there's a truth to a term or a phrase I've often used is where you're coming from is where you're going, or where you're coming from determines where you're going, which is to say what our motivation is, what our percept is gonna, you know, is gonna determine really kind of how we interact with the world, and then what comes of it. And the challenge here is that we're seeing things that are extremely destructive, and I think provably so. And I'm thinking about, you know, certain things that are being people are being asked to, put in their bodies
Yeah.
at the end of a sharp thing, and children especially, they're attempting to, and have been attempting really for quite some time, as you well know,
Oh,
to
yeah.
get the jabs accepted in children, because there is if they can get it scheduled, on the childhood
One of
vaccine
the
schedule,
72 other
yeah, and then
getting
they
before
have
age
blanket
12.
immunity at that point. Even if
Yeah.
adults use it, there's an immunity from the 1986 laws that we know that they went to. I guess it was Reagan at the time, and they said, we have all these diseases, and we need to be able to do this, and we can't be in a situation where we're constantly being harassed by lawsuits,
Mhm.
and so they passed that law, basically establishing a court for vaccine injury, U.S. vaccine injury court, that we know has paid out over $4 billion to date. And it's not, when you think of court, you think, oh, there's going to be, proper representation. But those who know about how it works know that it's very stacked. There
Yeah.
really isn't proper representation for the plaintiff. And the likelihood of getting something out of that court is almost nil. And there's a new mechanism for the COVID era shots, and a new kind of a court, or a new system there, and no one, as far as I know, has been paid anything on that. And so we're looking at a lot of narrative control, censorship, lies.
Yeah.
And
How is it in 52 weeks the science has changed weekly?
yeah.
I mean,
Well, it's
if you're a scientist,
right.
show me the proof. And yet you're seeing evidence by world-renowned experts in that area that aren't anti-anything,
Yeah.
saying, here's the research.
Yeah.
But weekly. I mean, I just heard it again today that Biden came out with, no, we want to require all masks in public transportation. But then all of the airlines and all of these other countries, mask isn't. So you get on a train in Scotland with a mask on. As soon as you cross the border into London, you can take it off. So what's changed?
Yeah. The virus.
I mean,
the virus is a political thing. That's obvious. Yeah,
it's obvious.
Like,
I mean, it's obvious to you and me. But again, how can we assist? And that's the question. How can I best create the reality I feel in my heart that is going to be who I am, and can offer my gifts and abilities to the world, to my family, to my friends, and not let myself get into this me and them. We're all the same. We're all the same. Okay? Fauci, okay? Trump, Biden, Hitler, okay? Think about this. They were living a soul path. They are a source creator being just like anyone else on this planet. And maybe their higher calling was to create so much trauma that people generations from then would never want that to happen again, to raise consciousness. The dark always can exist without the light. So we have created this situation. We created the CDC, the pharmaceutical industry, and there's no blame or judgment in this. But why did we create this? And to me, it's pretty clear. It's why I'm working on that movie, right? Fear. It's separation. We've gotten to the point where I don't see how we can separate things anymore. And at that point, you realize what has been the agenda behind all the fear, separation, and control. If in fact, which I know to be true, I think you know to be true, we are all divine beings. So is this how we live? No, this is not how humanity should be living. Okay. And I think there's an opportunity, and that more and more people are starting to wake up and remember who they are, to do their healing work physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. There's no judgment on anything. For me to take a step up the ladder, I got your hand, you're above me, and Winsong is down below me here on the next step. For any of us to take a step up that ladder, we got to do it together. And so this is the opportunity. How can we help people take that next step?
So I'm kind of a student of integral philosophy and approaches,
Hmm.
which basically recognizes that there's an I dimension to
Yeah.
experience, there's a we dimension
Hmm.
to experience, uh, and I'm going to call the I dimension, subjective me kind of,
Yeah.
and the we dimension has a couple of dimensions to it itself. There's an intersubjective experience, and which may speak to our relational patterns and kind of our morality, how we treat each other, that kind of thing. Then there are objective dimensions of experiences. We kind of I, we, it's, or it or its. Um, it is kind of the physical world, in the sense that my body and the things I can point to, the things in my reality, and also the interobjective world, which is the things that we can all agree are here, but also systems, right? The systems that we build, which is education, economies, religions,
Hmm.
governments,
Healthcare.
medical things. There's so we're always working in the I, in the we, and in the it's constantly. And so I think part of what we're pointing to and you're pointing to is that there's an absolute necessity that we work on the I, the work on
Hmm.
the, where we're coming from, what's motivating us, what are the dreams, what are the traumas, get as clear as we can, develop that inner witness objective state.
Yeah.
But then we do have this we part where we're interacting with uh, people in a domain of relationship, where we're no longer in agreement, it seems, on the objective facts of experience or existence.
Hmm.
And that's, I think, highly problematic. It's obviously part of how things have been set up. Now we've accepted them. Have we done them? Well, we're all born into this system. One
Hmm.
could, most of us come in blank slated, which is to say, not remembering anything from prior existence. I think there's plenty of evidence to suggest that we do rotate in and out from near-death experiences, and studies of children who've come back. I'm sure you've read the
Oh
data
yeah.
as well as I have. Can point to remember things in their from previous life with levels of specificity that are so far beyond chances to be ridiculous.
Yeah.
Um, and so, how do we how are we meant to navigate, because we have been in such a, for many of us, certainly I think in the last
Hmm.
number of years, decades, and a more passive orientation um to to the social experiment. In
Hmm.
other words, it's been a reality that's very much focused on consumerism in the last number of decades, getting ahead, getting yours for you, which is all fine. I think retiring and
It's
but there's
disappearing. That
yeah,
reality is disappearing
yeah,
quickly.
exactly. So that there's, I mean, we know, for example, the Social Security system has been bankrupt or is going bankrupt. It's not
Hmm.
designed to survive, and of course they've pilfered that money. And if you
Right.
really think about, they call that kind of like a benefit, but it's like it really is our money. I work for that. I put that in there. My employer put
Yeah.
that in there. Except when I was self-employed, then I did the whole thing, and I've been self-employed for a long time.
Hmm.
Um, and so and but we've been, I guess the point I'm making, we've been passive mostly, just kind
Yeah.
of like this is the way it
Accepting.
is, and we've seen now that approach is not very useful. And people like yourself have not really been very passive, I would say. I mean, you've really been
No.
out there kind of on the cutting edge, with your birthing centers and and your
Hmm.
work with the elderly, and trying to really instantiate a more conscious relational system with the whole life process. And so, but that's not everybody's experience. And
Well, I
we've
mean,
accepted at one level or another that we have that this is, the education system is fine, and this is fine, and people get in positions of power, and then they can tell everyone what to do. And when there's general sense of moving forward, a growing sense of, shall we say, safety and security with the social contract,
mhm,
which seems to have been, somewhat the case, at least up through the 70s and 80s. I think it's gotten rockier, obviously. Now, of course, we know there's system of employment is much more precarious for a lot of people. A lot of people have gone through our educational system only to come out with no job and huge debt. So there's and then there's a breakdown in that. It's like, well, are they responsible for that? Are we responsible, collectively responsible for that?
Mhm.
There's these questions we really haven't grappled with that are getting into this interobjective and intersubjective domains of what's real, what is our responsibility for our brothers and sisters, um, collectively and individually. How are we to, navigate this particular era and domain when, as Cliff I is saying, there are so many systems in place. We've accepted them to whatever degree we've been passive, but a lot of people haven't been passive. I haven't been passive in a lot of ways, but the people speaking out against the system or for awareness of what the system is doing. I think of like the 2003 rush to war in Iraq. I
Yeah.
can recall Joseph Wilson and Scott Ritter, these people placed in government. Scott was a UN weapons inspector. Joe Wilson was a diplomat. And when they spoke out, they were lionized, they were demonized.
Oh yeah.
I remember Joe Wilson's wife was called out. She was a CIA person who was, kind of undercover. And Scott Ritter had a lot of attacks on his character. It's like all the things that you're saying are true, but we are in a system that doesn't seem to want to change, and does feel like it's in a way invested in a scorched earth policy. So where do you
Okay.
come down on this?
Yeah.
It's real. It's out there happening.
You
What do you
said
do?
it. You said it earlier, Bucky Fuller. We move to this from a level above where the problem's occurring. Because as long as we're engaged in where the problem's occurring, then that's the frequency, the density that we're trying to, and that's never worked. I mean, no matter how awake people are, there's been wars, there've been leaders, it's been manipulation, control. That's this whole plane of existence. So I think back to people at HeartMath. I think back to Dr. Emoto and his work. Think about this. You could take the word fear, okay? And so sound, you're a musician and you understand sound, okay? And by the way, that song is awesome. I hope it gets in the podcast. And you could have a pool of water and run that frequency, and there'll be a symbol there, okay? Then take the word love and notice what happens. Frequency, you can change a frequency. So if you're trying to do it through an emotional, mental field, okay, your human personality, that John-Michael avatar, you're only going to have so much success influencing or shifting anything. But if you're in your angelic, evolved state of being, your frequency is higher. And that frequency will align. It's like, I use the example of a prism. And if you think of us today and the world we're in right now, pick a color, say it's red, okay. Mars, it's fire, it's anger, it's fear, it's all this stuff. However, on the other side of that prism is white light, which holds all the frequencies. So in your heart math, the frequency of the heart is bigger than your mind, your brain. That's why meditation, and I'll give you a concrete example. When Winsong and I were first together, it's my wife, and we'd get in an argument like a lot of couples, and taking sides and blah, blah, blah. And she was a body-mind therapist, and she understood about energy, and it wasn't going anywhere. And then, if we move apart, then we're silent for a half a day, and that sucks. You feel horrible. Why go through? So she said, look, let's just get up and go for a walk in nature. So we get up, go for a walk in nature. We got the body moving. We got the energy moving. We saw a beautiful tree. We could have a conversation without being in each other's face. And within 10, 15 minutes, energy was all gone. Nonviolent communication, wonderful tool. People could take advantage. I think you've got a group in New Hampshire. We have groups that have happened in Vermont. A lot of your work, John-Michael, it's communication, language. That's so powerful. So if you can get with somebody who may be totally different than you and use the tools of NVC, use the tools of heart math. Look at frequency, your own frequency, and notice when you're feeling separate or defensive or angry. That's within you to shift. And if you raise that frequency, there's nothing to push against there. And it actually will catch many people by surprise. They'll say, whoa, what was that? And you may be surprised. I've had this happen to me. A week later, I get a phone call. I don't know what happened last week, but whatever we were talking about, I looked up some of the things that, you were right. Can we get together again? It's little baby steps. No attachment to an outcome. But in the present moment is where we create. But if we're thinking about the outcome, or we're concerned, this guy's always been an a-hole because he was, far lefty, communist guy, or he was a radical communist, he's all about money. Just holding that thought form creates a separation. So they're perfectly on their soul journey, learning about communism, learning about capitalism. And may they learn the lesson sooner, but if we're holding it all is just a system, it all comes from source. Is that what we want? Another system that's controlling or separating people? Or, so you start a group, invite people in to have conversations, use some of the tools that we've been blessed to learn in our lives. And taking those little baby steps, you'll be amazed. People's consciousness will begin to change. And they'll begin to do is say, you know what? I've been that way all my life. Where did that start? Oh my God, I had an uncle that abused me when I was 4 years old. The memory just pop in. Perfect. Okay, so you can get some therapy, get some body work, work on that. And all of a sudden the personality begins to change. They start now they want to go out and be compassionate and join a child agency that's helping kids who've been abused. So once you've done your healing, then you'll find people come into your life where you can share the gift. Okay, then you start teaching it. It's an evolutionary process of waking up to who we are. So think about the power of what you're sharing, what we're looking at here. There's been no better time on planet Earth for people to wake up, or die, and go on with the journey through that. But there's so much fear and separation. And I'm seeing this. People, they're either going to isolate until they go crazy. I've seen that. I've seen a lot of, people I know have done suicidal things. That's one way. The other way is take a pause. What is this really about? Is it just about job and money, success? Is that what I'm really about? Is my whole life until I get Social Security, which now I'm seeing in the headlines isn't going to be there anyways? When I'm 65 and I got all these health conditions and on 20 pharmaceuticals, is that the life I'm working my ass off here? Is this something I really choose to do? Is there something I could do that would give me joy, that would put good energy into something creative? These are the kind of questions, if you can get someone to sit quiet enough, taking a walk in the woods may be the only way to get it to happen. Because again, most people have got their earbuds in, they're on their phone, they're looking at TV, they're listening to the radio. That's constant programming, okay? And it's like time out, folks. How much more separation do you need to go through before you take some personal time out to start asking yourself those deeper questions? And is this the life? Because you can change it. You can absolutely change it no matter what your situation is. There's a step you can take. And there are people out there, once you put out that kind of frequency, you'll notice miracles start happening. People start coming into your life. A video will get sent to you. Just the perfect timing for something you're wanting to investigate. And when you start living in that magic land of co-creation with source, there's no need anymore. Because if you hold the thought, what it is you want to create in your heart, let the mind rest. But really, what's it going to feel like a year from now when your perfect soulmate shows up? How are you going to feel in every cell of your body? That level of joy. Oh my God, it's my soulmate. She's there or he's there. Just hold that feeling and then put it out to the universe and then let it go. Don't be attached looking, oh, the phone rings. Is that going to be her? Don't let the mind, because the mind is taking you in the past and the future. only the presence in your heart. Be in the energetic field of that heart frequency of feeling what it's going to feel like when the world is at peace. And guess what? You just threw your pebble into that pond. It is touching every single molecule of water, the whole ocean of creation. Our thoughts, our words, our feelings, we are creating this reality. So be in that powerful place and realize we're in density, we're in 3D. So it may take some time to see it all play out. But if you spend your time trying to figure it out, guess what? That's wasted energy. I don't know. Is that
Well, I mean, that all makes sense to me. And
okay?
again, that's a lot of that is the I, or the subjective part, which
Hmm?
we absolutely have to start with. There's no question that we've, been, um, that we come in, and Bruce Lipton talks a lot about this. We, the first
Yeah.
6 years at least, we're in theta consciousness. We're absorbing the program, the programs,
Yeah.
which
How
is
I should be.
the
Right.
social milieu, um, parents, their belief systems, what they come in with. Of course, they're still iterating their ancestors'
Right.
patterns, and so there's much, you could say, intergenerational work to do, and family systems work is very interesting, I think, and very powerful.
Mhm.
Uh, and we're still, we are in an undiscovered country as we bring ourselves out of the darker dreams, the nightmares even
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
separation, right?
Mhm.
And the things that gives rise to. You can't watch a TV show or movie, you can't see them without that. It's just continuing to iterate the same story over and over again. It's frankly tiring. It's useless. There's
Yeah.
no point. There's really very little point to a lot of what goes by as creativity, um, except if it maybe helps somebody kind of put their finger on what's chewing in them. But I don't. I
Mhm.
think for the most part, those things aren't really going to be helpful. But I mean, but there's this, the space of interbeing that a lot of
Mhm.
people have been talking about,
Mhm.
which is the next phase, because most people, their trauma, unless they were walking on a path in the forest and fell down over a hill and broke their leg, that's one trauma. But
Mhm.
for most people, traumas happen at the level of the interpersonal,
Yes.
right? And so the healing, whereas you can certainly do a lot on your own,
Mhm.
and with assistance from other healing professionals, um, the kind of the next phase of human evolution feels like to me this moving back out into humanity,
Mhm.
into into the things that we're sharing in common,
Mhm.
talking about the water
Yeah.
and the soils and the food, all of which we know have been seriously compromised uh, in the industrial era, with claims that they're doing it for our best benefit. But we know that not to be the case. We know that permaculture and regenerative agriculture, for example, show much greater promise for feeding everybody than uh, industrial farming, which essentially, as we know, whether it's glyphosate or dicamba or other things, literally kills the soil microbiome. And of
Absolutely.
course, even just the till farming just breaks all of that up, and which, for those concerned about carbon, that, I mean, that's you're basically destroying your carbon sink there. There's something
Right.
Zach Bush talks about it, because he's done a lot of work also with regenerative farming. But just to get back into this era of, or into this field of interbeing, where we haven't in the past had these conversations.
Right.
We've accepted the money system as a system.
Mhm.
We've accepted the government system as a system. Let's just talk about those two for a moment. And a lot of that's based on separation. Even if we know that it's not the perfect thing, most people seem to think that that's the way it is, and you have to have markets, and you can't have governments in there, and so there's a great and not undeserved distrust of groups of people coming together. But there's also a block on seeing that groups of people can actually come together and
Mhm.
develop systems, and think about different ways that things can be. So and of course, doing that puts most people right into, you know, their primary experiences around coming forth with their uniqueness, their perspective. And so many people have the experience that their perspective was not welcomed as children. So yes, you got to do that inner work, but you have to then come back out because there's I'll call it, for lack of a better term, the proving of the healing that you've done. And maybe this is more in the sense of the proving, like a proving of like a dough,
Yeah,
bread
like
dough,
bread.
so it's like when you're proving it, it's like it's right, is the yeast really active? You're proving that this thing can rise. I love that idea, even just that
Rise
image.
of New Hampshire. Seems to me I've heard that before.
There it is. Yeah, it's yeah. But it's like the proof is in the pudding. There's this, you have to move it out into activity, into the social sphere,
Sure.
to see what's possible, to know what's possible, because otherwise it just remains as a kind of a beautiful thought in your mind. Even a prayer is a beautiful thought. And I came across somebody recently, I don't know who it was, might have been Zach, might have been somebody else, just saying that, hey, praying is all fine, but you still have to move it out. You still have to move yourself into maybe you could call it the living prayer. We've talked about this notion of the convivium, right? This often used in the sense of a feast, but this, to me, it's a community of souls that are now coming out into, or slowly coming out into the public square to articulate a very different vision. And it seems to be one that both transcends and includes a spiritual or religious vision, transcends and includes a sense of or a conversation around everything that's gone before: government, economy, etc., education, and yet transcends that because we're ready to see something different. And so the invitation here is to come out into that square and trust that who we are is enough, that we don't have to have it all figured out, but our questions, or quest ion, right? Our questions are offerings that we throw into the collective space of interbeing for resolution, for resolution, for bringing into a new possibility. And we have to have those, because either we have these conversations, we trust ourselves enough to begin to have these conversations, to talk about what's really a system that it really can serve life, which we don't have right now greatly. We have really more of an exploitation system that takes life and kind of leaves a wasteland behind. I always really struck with the idea of the transhumanists, like, well, this doesn't work, we got to do better, we got to get off the planet, we got to find other planets because, gosh, we're using this one up. It's like, that's like the opposite to me. It's like the opposite of, yeah, exactly. If that's what we're doing, we should absolutely not leave the planet, because we don't want to export that exploitation mindset. But yet it's
COVID
there.
of the universe is what we become.
Yeah. So let me post this to you as a question. If you had Anthony Fauci and Peter Daszak and Joe Biden and whoever else, Klaus Schwab, out there, if you were to just meet them, say that you just met them on the street, how would you, knowing Bill Gates, knowing what they're attempting to do, seeing with clear eyes, maybe even not from a blameful place, but just clear eyes, this is what they're attempting to do. What would you say to them? How would you engage with them? If you were to just meet them on the street, what would your approach be?
Yeah, well, I mean, in a situation like that, given what I think I know about them, I'd probably just start with a question. How are you doing today? What's important to you right now? And then based on the response I get, engage in a conversation that could lead to something. It's like throwing the pebble in the pond.
All right. Well, so let's play with this, shall we? I'm gonna be Anthony, okay, and you can be Paul, and so you just asked me how I'm doing today. Well, I'm still frustrated that we're not getting a greater a greater acceptance of my policies for vaccinating everybody on the planet, because I think this is the way to make sure that we have a healthy planet.
Yeah, I really hear that frustration, and why do you think that?
Well, I think there's a lot of people who are misinformed, and they don't see what I see, and I see this as the way to get everybody.
How did you
on.
come to see this is the way, Anthony?
Well, I mean, we've had decades and decades of seeing that vaccines have helped end this and that disease, and we have our modern medical system is a miracle. It's what's it's what's created so much joy and health. It's very hard to keep a straight.
You're doing really well. I mean, that's going to be a stretch for you, my friend.
But yeah, and of course, I'm not just thinking of Anthony, but I'm thinking about everybody who is
again. You got to start
plugged into this narrative. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So and let me back up a little bit, because you raised some things I wanted to respond to in the course of this, and then we can kind of focus back in here. Sure. But to me, that's like an impossible situation on one level. But again, if someone's willing to engage with me, I can have a conversation and plant some seeds. Like perhaps something like, well, Anthony, how many decades have they used Roundup, in agriculture? And here's the evidence of the soil, killing people. Here's a $5 billion lawsuit they've lost. Just because something's been used a long time, you don't know what's going to happen 50 years from now. But we do have much science. If you'd like to adjust some of the places you're getting, where are you getting your information? From the CDC? Do you realize that the board of directors there are all from the pharmaceutical industry? Do you think maybe it's not as unbiased? That maybe you could look at a few other ones? I'm just suggesting that there's other information than you personally. I know you're our president, but presidents are supposed to lead. And I'm in the healthcare for 45 years, and I've seen the damage that's happened to people from some of these, quote, medical solutions. And I would just invite you to consider, that maybe you could take a broader look. That's all, something like that. But going back in the conversation, I'm reminded of a couple of things. One is the 100th monkey, okay? All of a sudden, one day, monkeys start washing their sweet potatoes, okay? Spontaneously, and this is science, this is proven, spontaneously, monkeys around the world started doing the same behavior. It goes back to, yes, we are in the world, but not everybody wants to engage in the world. There are people that will sit in a cave and meditate and put out the highest love frequency all day long, 24/7. That is having an impact on everything on this planet. So I say yes, and if it's in your path to engage in the world and help at that level of the birthing process, let's go for that. I totally respect, honor, and support that. But I also honor, respect, and support someone who says, you know what? How I feel I can best help is just to meditate and pray, or work in my garden and put that energy into food that then I'll make available to people in the community. Whatever the path is that's at that higher frequency, and how it plays out in 3D reality versus other levels of frequency, they're all valuable. I mean, all of us are source. So think about this. You and I, these two little rays of frequencies, the John, Michael, and the Paul, we're kind of streaming out through creation as one of these threads of source. And oh my God, we're kind of weaving up, bump into each other, and wow, that feels good. I like this frequency. That's really cool. But then over here, there's another frequency that's got a whole different shape, and it's creating a lot of turmoil, right? So we find a few more people here, and our frequencies are coming into some harmony. And all of a sudden we see, well, that big one, if we just go into that big curve, we all can be there. And we're all now moving in the same frequency. It's to me, again, it's thinking of it in terms other than 3D in a way to help me be in the world, but not of the world. But I really do see there are 7 billion people on the planet. There's 7 billion ways that we can all create together if we're coming from the heart frequency. And not everybody is at exactly the same place or drawn to the same thing. But I feel they're all of value. And even what's being created in the separation is causing us to have this conversation, to do this podcast. That may go out to be seen by 100 people that may say, you know what? Yeah, there was something pretty cool there. Maybe I'll reach out to John-Michael. Maybe you'll teach a course, John-Michael, and get a group going that could help people look at some of these issues. I'm doing the same thing, but for me, I don't feel it's the best use of my personal time to be out demonstrating, on the State House steps, even though I might be real effective at that. But I feel doing what I'm doing with you today is probably more effective and more of a use of what I love doing and, who I am. And I will support people or buy them a meal for those that are going out to do that. But again, find each of you watching this podcast, just find what gives you joy. That may sound hard, but really, if it makes you smile, go out and be in nature and just tune in to whatever your version of source is, God or creator or, whatever. And just know that you're not separate. You're a thread of that creation here to learn in this plane of duality. Okay, there's no real good or bad here. We have the good or bad through our programming, our belief system, things we don't like, okay? But that's okay, that's duality. So if we have that, how do we respond to that? You said before, responding is different than reacting. We want to be able to, how do we respond to that? What can we do to help someone who's in pain? We reach out and hold them, or we get them some food or whatever, because that's who we are, okay?
Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
As you're talking, I'm thinking of the Nazis
Yeah.
in the 30s and their attempt to control the narrative, as we're seeing similar things today.
They've succeeded.
Their othering of obviously the Jews, and not just the Jews, but the Gypsies and others. There's a lot of othering of non-Aryans, shall we say?
Yep.
What would your approach be if we kind of like overlay that with what's going on today? It's like we've often heard the saying, when they came for the Jew, I didn't say anything, and then they finally, they came for this, came for that, and then finally they came for me. I think we've seen a lot of suppression, for example, of voices from the right, but we're also seeing some on the left when they're not for the narrative. And I think we could all agree that the killing was something we'd like to avoid, if we can. We can agree that or we can see that some people saw what was happening and got out. Others stayed behind and tried to help, and maybe they got ground under the wheel. I think Schindler, the whole Schindler's List thing, and then many got killed because they didn't leave or couldn't leave. And I would say, the great, your average masses of people are not mobile. They don't have the resources to just up, although a lot of people just have the will to up, maybe, the trusting the voice. But, I'm trying to work a hard edge with you, a little bit of a hard edge here.
Good. Yeah.
Which is like, it's like, if what we're seeing here has some resonances with that, and, you can leave and go create something somewhere else in the world where there was a lot more light and possibility. And yet these things still happen, and the bankers and, the IBMs and the Fords and the whoever's were the Dulles brothers and others that were wanting this to happen, perhaps the Khazarian mafia, the Zionists that were, wanted their separate thing. So where do we come down as a collective on seeing, feeling, allowing this to happen versus stopping it, versus, going out and doing our own separate thing over there? What is our responsibility? for the millions who are dying from
Yeah,
whatever.
there's no guilt or judgment or responsibility for that. There's an ability to respond, yes. And each person, it's freedom for each person to be the source creator being and respond in a way that's in integrity and in truth with what's in their heart. So for some, it would be, we're in the military. I want to get weapons and go down and take them on. Okay. Other people, it's going to be, you know what? I'm an attorney. I'm going to sue their ass in court. Other people are educators. They're going to educate, talk to their neighbors. They're going to go into the schools and be with kids and help them learn, which they're able to do without a teacher. These beings come in with an innate ability, profound, more than what we have. They're so creative. Their brain is all one at that point. And so it's like, again, each person, and then again, if you find your tribe, there's power in numbers, so that, you and me together have more than just me alone. So although we're all source creator beings, we're all source, but on this existence, this plane of existence. So getting together in a group where you have affinity, you can create more than maybe you can yourself in terms of organizing a demonstration project or something, okay? Have 100 people there, the energy's there, it's more visible. But again, I'm not going to judge one person's choice to how they want to respond to what's going on. I get it's horrendous. But again, you have to be true to yourself. Where are your skills? What are you able to do? I remember a story that happened to me when I was marrying my first wife, where she was in this very strict English religion, and they were nonviolent. And here I was, it was Vietnam. I had a low draft number, and I ended up spending time in the Navy. And they sat down with the church elders. I had to be interviewed to see if it was okay that they married their daughter and in church. And I grew up in a lot of different religions, so I respect all religions, but I wasn't religious. I was very spiritual. And they said, well, what are you going to do? They said, oh, how do you feel about violence? I say, I don't feel good about it. I said, but I just finished OCS training where I had to learn hand-to-hand combat and how to shoot a gun and wield a sword. And, if I'm there with my family and someone comes breaking into my house, I'm imagining I would grab a club or something, because I don't believe in killing. I don't have weapons here. But I wouldn't know until in that moment. I'd have to respond. And I'm not saying I wouldn't kill, but I think I would defend my family to the death. But I can't promise you. I don't know. That's such a serious question for people. And for some people, going and protesting might bring up that kind of, I don't know about that. That seems a little risky to me. And so that you have to honor each person's path. But I think education, to me, underlies all of them. Okay. And that's, I feel it's helping to educate people that we care about in our lives, and those that aren't, even the Fauci, that there's another reality here, folks, that we can choose. And if you honestly look back through the beginning of time on this planet, it never has mattered who ruled, who lost the war, who won the election, who lost the election. We have the same issues, even worse, happening right now that have always happened. When is it time that we start creating from a different way in a different place? And that's who we are. That's this great awakening that you and I have talked about in these podcasts. And it's such good questions you're asking. And then I also have asked myself, it's like, it seems a bit overwhelming if I let it, see what's going on there. But how could I be most effective? And I keep coming back. It's got to be true to what I feel in my heart. It's got to have compassion in it. And it's going to utilize whatever skills and abilities I feel I have that can contribute. And I would say that to all of our audience today, anyone listening to this, to just take a moment to just love yourself and look in your heart. You're a brilliant human being who've survived to be here today. What is it in you that is special? What is it that you love about you? And how could you leverage that to be present to what's happening in your life and in the world right now? whatever that is, to be as effective, to be supported by what is it you need, you feel you need, and reach out. And as we do that together, we're that 100th monkey. We're that pebble in the pond. And it only takes a few, as we know through physics, right? A few to change the whole frigging world. We don't have to have everybody wake up all at the same time. It's a journey. But for those of us that are willing to take that journey and take that step together right now, everything is possible. Everything is possible.
Yeah. And yeah, you made an important point. I don't want to
Please
bypass it around, it's not your responsibility to change what other people are necessarily choosing or going through, beyond what you're called to do and feel, connected to do. And it is the difficult part the challenging part for us is that, with open hearts, we feel the pain, and we feel the struggle, and we feel the hurt and the fear. And we see the choices that people are making. And I guess it's a judgment for us to even say that they're making the wrong choice, but it's not beyond our capacity to observe that, you can make choices that are going to bring you down a certain path, and that people are making those choices.
It may or may not, John-Michael. It may or may not. We don't know what that soul's path is.
We don't know the individual path. That's very
what
true.
that might bring them.
Yeah.
And honestly, I go back through my life and I look at the most traumatic things that have happened to me. At the time, I was going to go lie in the street, run me over. I'm ready to get out of here. They were so painful, so traumatic. And yet now, and this is the mind, okay, it takes you in the past or in the future. I go back, and what I learned about myself and about life was so profound and moved so deeply in me that I've been able to draw from those experiences to share with other people that are going through a similar trauma. And it's not my job to change them, but you just pay attention. Everything you need in your life is going to show up if you just are clear in your heart what it is. And you can't blow it. You can't miss it. Because if you miss that one opportunity and it's meant to be you and source, it's going to come around again. It's that trust in your own self, your own heart, your own ability, your own joy, and live your life from that place. And then notice and put out when you need some assistance, if you even know you need some assistance. And you'll find there are people there that are willing to be there with you, not because they're responsible for your healing. No, just because they have compassion, as you so perfectly stated. And in that compassion, they can be present. It's not their job to fix you. It's to be present. That's what they feel they can do. And so they're taking action. And it's subtle, but it's powerful, because most of us are used to operating through our avatar, through our mind, through our emotions, okay? Physically, we think this is reality, and it is in this level. But the reality of who you are eternally is huge. And so as you can step into that place, you'll find that the density of separation and fear and judgment, you'll notice the thought, but you won't have any energy behind it. And where you're coming from then is your heart and your compassion, which means you're then able to respond in a way that's true, not from being responsible for what's going on.
That's the hardest thing, I think, of the current passage, because we see people dying. There's no question. We see people dying, suffering. And I think in the case of, it's somewhat easier, I think, to say, oh, well, they're a free will being and they're going to, have their path. It's harder when it's people that or people that family members, good friends that are either deciding to go their own way and cut you off entirely, or family members making choices that that you're aware could be very damaging to them, and it's necessary to let them go as well. We cannot,
you can hold them in your love,
birth them, but
in compassion, and see them as making the highest and best choice they can make in their life. That's what you can contribute. But they're going to live it. They're making their choice. They've got it. Their soul has created that experience because it's something of value for their life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we can still be in pain and have tears, but then let it go, because trust that people can only do this perfectly right now. And our job is to be able to respond from authenticity of who we truly are.
Yeah. 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 So the image I got when you were talking was getting into the river is kind of what the great invitation is at this point. There's the river is taking us somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And yet we're also, we are, we bring our capacity to swim as well. And we're not just, willy-nilly being raked down the rapids, but we can swim. And that involves an intentionality combined with trust that, we are in this grander experiment and that we can, engage in this larger conversation of interbeing. It's time for us to step out. It's time for us to just to be more present, with ourselves and with each other in the social space, whether that's being present from a place of just letting people have their experience and being aware of them and just acknowledging that that's what they're going through, or whether it's answering to an assistant calling that we offer something out into the universe as education, as a clarion call, as a possibility. And for me, what keeps coming is, and this is just my sense of my calling, and has been for a long time, is I'm here to help set the table. And that's for myself and my own personal work. Set the table, which can mean something as simple as have my guitar and other things out for creativity, have them out and about, so that they're close to hand. So these are the things that I reach for in exploring and expressing, what my heart is being called to do or be, and yet also setting the table for others, vis-a-vis Rise Up New Hampshire, other venues where really we're creating a space for others to come in. And
it's an invitation.
Yeah, articulating what that space is.
A sacred space to invite people to get nourished. I mean, that's so beautiful. So beautiful.
And then in the space of interbeing, or from that space of interbeing, or within that conversation or that evolution, being able to talk about what is this? How do we nurture? What are the agreements that we have? How do we nurture this to be more as inclusive as we know how to be, and
how do we navigate in this river?
As honoring of each other's truths and choices, and participation, and knowing when to just step out of the way, but also as we come together in real-time space, on those occasions where we have that circle, and how do we create that permission for acknowledging each other's journeys, and also engaging each other in these critical, formative, creative, forward-looking conversations about, hey, where do we want to go now? And I often use the metaphor of, which I'm sure I've said here before, of, as if we've just landed in a spaceship. As if we've just landed. What would it be like if we just landed here now as a group of people? Say, maybe the people in your orbit, maybe the Dunbar number, which is often considered to be about 140 or 150 people that you can possibly really know on a good level and interact with in community, even though I know in the reality of Zoom and social media, that's really expanded. But in terms of really how you create, it's not a huge number, right? And how we can work inside of that milieu, that community, that convivium, to bring something forward. What are we here to bring forward into that? What is our gift? What is the stone soup idea, right? It's like, hey, I'm going to make some, that story, right? Stone soup. So, hey, I want some soup. So I go into, let's say I'm a stranger, or I go into a circle and say, hey, I've got a stone here. I'd like to make some soup called stone soup. Do you have a pot? Or do you have some hot water? Do you have a fire? Oh, do you have a vegetable? Do you, and so you start with a stone, which seems to be nothing.
Right.
And you end up with community making soup.
We've done it. We've done it.
That point of view of just arriving here, it's like, can we give ourselves permission to see this world anew, to see the possibilities anew, and be willing to, bring that critical thinking, that observer capacity, that sense of starting over, to this experiment, the social experiment, so that we are not stuck in the past, not stuck in the way things have been,
So,
and can say, oh, if we were to start over here, what would make sense for an economy, for working together in community, for making sure everybody gets fed, for advancing, technology. We still want, we still have, the opportunity to bring forth unique and inspiring inventions and various other things. How can we do that? How can we maximally create a space for each person to rise to their level of inspiration, to their level of soul fire, if you will, and encourage people to take on the questions of how do I contribute to this? What is my unique calling? And for some, it's going to be an individual thing of going really deeply into something. It might be meditative, as you were saying before. It might be, scientific. It might be artistic. It might be social. It might be some other thing. But then how do we work together in the space of interbeing to maximize this possibility for evolution in the direction that we're feeling, that our hearts are being called to do? So that's
the symbol that popped in as you were speaking just speaks totally to that. What do we do together on this planet? Everybody. We breathe.
Yeah.
Okay. And the breath can be conscious. And as I said earlier in our podcast, it's also unconscious. Okay.
Yeah.
We're unconscious of who we truly are, perhaps, source. Some people do. Okay. But the part that's conscious is breathing. So you get together and we're breathing together. In every breath, there's a pause, no matter how tiny, okay, between the in and the out. Now, what happens when you go and see a horror movie or go hit yourself? Okay, it's like a shock. You breathe in, everything comes in. Think about this time we're in, is the pause between the breaths. And what we're tuning in here is what is it we're going to want to breathe out together? Because the breath connects all of us. Breathing in and breathing out. Go do that in nature and remember who we are.
Breath connects us all. We'll leave it on that note, Paul.
Okay.
I think that's a good place. Also, I think conspiracy, doesn't that mean to breathe together? So yes, let's have a good conspiracy.
I'm with you.
In the most positive sense of creation, really. So, thanks, Paul.
Thank you, John Michael.
Today.
Love you. Blessings.
Yeah.
Okay.